Thank you so much for joining me for week 3 of the 12-week content creation challenge. And today I'm going to be demonstrating to you how a neutral density filter works and why you need one. So first, what is a neutral density filter, or better said, an ND filter? Well, it's simply a filter that goes on your lens, and this one is variable, so I can adjust it between 2 to 5 stops of light. And what that does is it cuts out stops of light so that you can still have a nice shallow depth of field and have a proper exposure. When you're shooting video, you're typically shooting at 24 frames per second, which means that your shutter speed is like 1/48th or more likely 1/50th of a second. And if you want to introduce that nice depth of field, give it that real cinematic look, you're going to let a lot of light in. And so what that's going to cause is what you see here on my screen. The image is completely blown out. We can't use it. But what happens when we use that ND filter? As you rotate it and you're cutting out stops of light. So as I adjust the filter, the exposure gets a little bit better. Now I'm shooting in Cine 4 with this particular shot. So the minimum ISO is 200. Being it's daylight, I'm putting it as low as I can, and that's the lowest that it can go. What I found here is that even cutting out 5 stops of light, I'm at an aperture of f2.8. It still was overexposed, which could be okay. So I can kind of drop the exposure or the highlights. You know, we can kind of mess with it and probably retain some good data. But it's not really exposed correctly. So the other thing that you can do is you can adjust the aperture. So maybe the aperture is just too wide and you need to drop it. So what I ended up doing was I opened up the filter again. I adjusted the aperture to about an f4 and then dropped it back to cutting out 5 stops of light. And so here, the exposure is a lot better. It was actually pretty well right where it needed to be. And so it still gives me some good dynamic range. But as you can see, this is really important with shooting video outside, because if you don't have an ND filter, what's going to happen is you're not going to be able to get those shallow depth of field that you really want, especially when you're filming people. You want to blur out that background, and so you've got to have something to cut out the light so that you can still have that shallow depth of field and keep your frame rate the same and your shutter speed the same, so you don't have weird motion blur going on. So this one, like I said, it's by PolarPro. It's the Peter McKinnon version. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but it's just a great product that I've used. And so I'm going to show you some other clips of using that. Now I also, on these next few clips, I forgot to change my profile to Cine 4, and so it didn't turn out exactly how I like, but the colors are still nice. So I'm using the ND filter here to cut out all that light and still run at 24 frames per second. And so I can keep that really good shallow depth of field even with it being so bright outside. And that is why you need one. So you can pick up one of these at polarpro.com, and they are expensive, but when you're buying filters, you want to spend money on quality filters. You don't want to buy cheap ones just because you can't afford the expensive ones, because what's going to end up happening is those really cheap ones are going to end up causing issues with the colors, with the way the image looks. It's going to maybe make the image quality poor. Whereas if you bought quality glass lenses, then you're going to have a better image overall, and you're going to be a little bit more satisfied with it, especially with their customer service is great as well. I've reached out to them on a couple of things, but yeah, highly suggest the Peter McKinnon PolarPro ND filter. The other thing that's really great about this particular one is because they've locked in how many stops of light, it completely eliminates an issue that these have, where typically you can just spin these continually and it doesn't stop on a lot of the other models. But this one, it stops at 5 stops of light, and then this eliminates this cross polarization that you usually get with other filters, where it causes this weird X shadowing on the frame. And so that's just another thing that I just really like about it. I'll probably pick up the other one. The other one cuts out 6 to 9 stops of light, and I've found that might actually be better in some circumstances, especially if you're doing long exposure photography of like landscapes and stuff. ND filters also are really great for that. But that's my video today. I really want you to take into consideration, if you are doing video, get an ND filter so you can still have that shallow depth of field. You can still keep 24 frames per second, 1/50th shutter speed, and you can get these very cinematic videos, high quality, and keep the proper exposure. It's been one of the best investments that I've made so far for my Sony Alpha A7 III, and yeah, that's my suggestion for you. If you have any questions, or if you want to see any other demonstrations of this, let me know. Until then, have a great week.